December 23rd, 2012, Sunday. Shush! Glimmer told those outside the room the young alphas claimed as their own. What's going on? Bioforce asked quietly as she approached the French stealth. Cosmos and some of the Fracas hitters are sleeping in there. Bioforce smiled and said, You're guarding the room so Cosmos can sleep? Since Vector drugged him and shot him twice, he's only had 3 hours of sleep. He just got back from rebuilding the last hall and needs some rest. What about you? You've accompanied him the whole time he was working. I'm a natural regenerator. I don't need much sleep. I get the being selfless part, but you should get some rest too. Cosmos doesn't need that much protecting. You saw what he did in battle yesterday. I know, half the enemy went down because of his electric show. Vector knows it too. That's why he was the only one Vector singled out to shoot during the fight, and that's why I'm standing watch. Bioforce looked puzzled. You think you could stop Vector if he came to this door? My precognition would give me time to raise the alarm, Glimmer said. Okay, have fun. It's a miracle, Olympian said as he ran down the hall. What is? Darkspeed asked as he saw Olympian. IQ! He's up! Walking and talking! I'm going to see him now! Darkspeed blinked where IQ was. The red-haired boy was wearing a hospital gown and standing next to his bed. Virtuoso was asleep on the chair next to the bed. IQ, are you all right? Darkspeed asked. I think I'm fine. Is she all right? IQ said as he pointed to Virtuoso. Darkspeed gently shook Virtuoso to get her to wake. She didn't. Darkspeed touched his earpiece and called for Bioforce. Look at you, luck of the Irish, Olympian said with a smile on his face. What do you mean? IQ asked. You know, luck of the Irish. I don't understand, IQ said plainly. Olympian looked funny at Darkspeed. IQ had never said he didn't understand something. Darkspeed started to suspect something was wrong. What's your name? Darkspeed asked. Seamus, IQ said. Do you know your last name? IQ thought for a second. No. Do you know your handle? IQ. Olympian interrupted. Do you think you were supposed to tell us your real name? Am I not supposed to? Go fetch Omni, Darkspeed told Olympian. Just calm him, Olympian said. He doesn't have one of those new ones yet. Go! Bioforce entered at the same time Olympian left. Wow, she did it, Bioforce said with a big smile. I can't wake her, Darkspeed pointed to Virtuoso. Bioforce was quick to touch her teammate. She's exhausted, really exhausted. Can you help her? Already on it. Bioforce lifted Virtuoso to the bed and placed a hand on her face. Aren't you going to wake her? No, I'm going to revitalize her, but she really should get some real sleep. Dr. DeClute walked in to see IQ looking back at her. I'm glad to see you up and around, she said as she put her arms around him and gave him a hug. I'm glad to see you too, IQ said with his arms limp by his side. Are you all right? Dr. DeClute asked as she moved his arms. IQ's face and body was very relaxed as he looked back at her like a child learning. I'm fine. He doesn't know his last name, Darkspeed said. Is that important, a last name? Should I have one? IQ asked. You already have one, Dr. DeClute said. Omni walked into the room trailed by Arthur and Olympian. He saw Dr. DeClute talking with IQ. This is a first. He doesn't remember some things, Dr. DeClute said. I'll get Amunet to check him out. We looked high and low for Amunet and couldn't find her, Arthur said. You wouldn't. I gave her a set of instructions to follow if Vector ever showed his face again. You'd never find her. You sure Vector didn't get her? No, she's a great survivor, more than you will ever know, Omni said as he left the room. Hey, Darkspeed yelled at Omni. We need to get you up on the new comm system. Right, when I get back you can have Cosmos add it to my armor. IQ watched Omni leave the room. Was that Omni? Olympian smiled and looked over at the boy in the hospital gown. That's right. Maybe he just needs some time to start remembering. I know that Omni wore black and gold armor, IQ said. How did you know that? Darkspeed asked. I remember all the facts and figures that Virtuoso taught me. What else did she teach you? Olympian asked. IQ started to dump information that was stored in his brain rapidly. Fluency in 82 spoken languages, fluency in 31 written languages, reading through the postdoctoral levels, including extensive classical works, mathematics through postdoctoral, physics, both practical and theoretical, through postdoctoral levels, computer sciences. Darkspeed cut him off. Did she teach you anything special? I know the design and function of tactical costumes and their systems, in-gun theory, nanoscience, and the engineering history of Bishamon Sentinels. She turned him into a library, Olympian said. Wait until Amunet checks him and gives a verdict, Dr. DeClute said. That's a good idea, Darkspeed said. Why aren't you in the lab? Dr. DeClute asked. Excuse me? The hand is in the lab. I don't understand. Dr. DeClute looked directly at Darkspeed and said, Part of the training you haven't received yet states all combat sites are combed over and searched. Very often we gain knowledge of the enemy or clues as to their whereabouts. They found the hand you blew off of Vector. Darkspeed blinked away and stopped at the laboratory. 2 techs stood on either side of the door to the lab. Darkspeed kept moving at a high speed past them and entered the lab. He approached Prism and stopped next to her. Be careful, Darkspeed said. Prism seemed startled as an alarm went off and the techs stepped into the room with K-guns. Darkspeed turned to face the 2 techs. It's okay, Prism said and turned the alarm off. What was that? Darkspeed asked. Super speed detector. You're kidding. Vector would have killed them, you, taken the hand, and read a book before anyone heard that. You came in here for a reason? Vector had one of his weapons rigged to explode. I just wanted to warn you that that might happen. I have the hand over here. Prism led Darkspeed to a large table with machinery all around it. The force field around it was similar to the ones used around the pit. Good. Do you know what it's made of? I have a guess, but it's crazy. It seems to be made of living nanotech. It even has its own DNA signature. That's not crazy. During the fight, I watched his hand grow back, Darkspeed said. Really? I thought maybe he had a spare or something. You didn't see the video? What video? Prism asked. I set up high-speed cameras to capture the battle. I wanted to be able to review it later. She and I already watched most of it. I really need to see that video, Prism said seriously. Sure, I'll make you a few copies. That would be great. Omni was hovering over Paris. It was pitch dark and he knew he would startle a lot of people. The hope was most were sleeping at this hour, because it just couldn't be helped. He made a short burst of light that made night look like day. He did it quickly several times in a pattern that lasted only a few seconds. Omni then descended to the place Amunet would be looking for him. Omni stood on the cobblestone sidewalk of the nondescript side street. He looked at the pastry shop that was directly behind him. The window hadn't changed much over the past few decades. I wonder how far away she is, Omni thought to himself. He looked down on his armor and wondered how conspicuous he was right now. After a few minutes, he heard footsteps coming closer to his position. Omni turned to see Amunet walking close. She smiled as he stood still waiting for her. They don't leave their chairs out at night. I was hoping to sit down for a moment, Omni said. I wanted to go and help, but I hid myself like you told me, Amunet said. If Vector thought he could take you, he would. It was best that you stayed hidden, Omni said as he pointed at the pastry shop. Remember this? My first taste of Europe. How can I forget? I love the way you demanded to be serviced first, Omni said with a smile. Blame my royal upbringing. The look on the lady's face was priceless. That was a long time ago. I've learned to blend in since then, Amunet said. I need to take you to London. There's something I need you to do, Omni said. Of course. Omni took Amunet by the waist and flew the both of them up into the air. He used his telekinesis to help buffer the wind off the unprotected Amunet. Amunet placed one hand on IQ's head. A tense moment passed as those watching on waited for her verdict. Not the approach I would have used, but she did a good job. When she wakes, tell her I said she's very talented, Amunet said. So, IQ's all right? Omni asked. He will be, eventually. In an effort to further her own education, she kept copying the information from others into her own mind. In IQ, she placed the total of everything she's learned. He has everything from Miss Waldron, Dr. Noguchi, and himself before the attack. Virtuoso also addressed the involuntary brain functions. What about social skills? Dr. DeClute asked. She decided it best if he relearned some things on his own. Experiences are what make us unique, and she wanted him to have his own. When will he be ready to get back on his team? Omni asked. Amunet laughed. 5, maybe 3 years. His intelligence makes him a big asset. Can he still solve problems? Darkspeed asked. He can, but he needs to have a childhood first. Can you imprint a childhood for him? Omni asked. I don't know how fair that would be to IQ, Amunet said. We need him. Then I'll need a child with happy childhood memories. If you give me a rotten child, he'll be rotten. She, go fetch Mrs. Pringle and Alex, Omni said. How old is Alex?